What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 381. My name is Steve, one of the co-hosts. And as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
Guys, we've had a busy week, man. We had a full episode last week with the tier list. Hope you guys all like that, those who have listened or watched on YouTube. And then we had a little bonus episode, a 0.5, which we don't do much anymore. But we had seen so many things that had kind of come out recently or even last week that didn't get featured because of the Flash DC, episode that we did. So hopefully everybody grabbed that on Monday and checked in on some of those reviews as well. This week is kind of getting back to our normal format. We have our required viewing, which I picked a few weeks back, which is Matt Johnson's Blackberry, which is now available on video on demand. After a pretty successful.
Is it available on Blackberry?
That's a good question.
Good luck. I don't know. There's probably some marketplace in there somewhere. Maybe I don't know. Yeah. So we'll get to that in a bit, and then we're going to talk about our feature review. Our feature review this week, which is the new Jennifer Lawrence sex comedy, R-rated, coming of age, red band trailer, getting all the views. You know what I mean? Like they really kind of pushed this angle for the movie. But No Hard Feelings is out in theaters this week, and John and I were able to check it out. Unfortunately, Ronald couldn't make it to the screening, so we won't. There's nothing to really spoil in discussing the movie, but
okay,
we'll kind of talk about that a bit, and there's be a couple movies we'll talk about at the end, like we always do. But
yeah.
The feature this episode will definitely be No Hard Feelings, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But let's do required viewing. It's been a bit. And again, my pick was Blackberry a couple episodes back, a couple weeks back. I was kind of bummed that I didn't get to see this in theaters. I try to see some of these smaller movies that I've kind of heard great things about and have a lot of people in them that I really enjoy, including Jay Baruchel, Glenn Howerton. And I do like Matt Johnson, too. He's not a well-known actor or director, but he's done a couple things that I really thought were interesting. But unfortunately, I missed it. But, in the world we live in, VOD, hello. You know what I mean? Like, if I miss you by 2-3 weeks, you've made the majority of the money you're going to make in theaters and they bring you home. So, it seemed like a good pick. And have you guys heard anything about Blackberry before I picked it? Or, I know, John, you made the joke a couple episodes back about the whole like Tetris, Air, Blackberry, the trilogy of like 90s products.
Yeah. About like making films about beloved products or beloved companies, which I think might be a thing we might see more of, as I think younger generations that are less cynical about attaching themselves to like a property like that. Like maybe people have their own way of doing it now that feels separate from the corporate identity of the thing. But I feel like there's that like personal ownership of brands and stuff that I don't think has decreased. So I was thinking today, watching Blackberry, like, oh, this is probably not going to be the last movie like this that we see. There's many, many more products that they can try to get us to get like some kind of a reaction to.
Waiting for the Nintendo one.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
we're going to get a Nintendo one, right?
Well, the Tetris was kind of connected to that, right? I mean, it was kind of dancing around that. But as far as that, it was on my radar. I like Glenn Howerton a lot. I noticed that I think I saw the trailer and I was very curious about seeing him play what seemed like a little bit more of a dramatic role, or a little bit of the kind of taking his douchey comedic persona and twisting it a little bit for this kind of movie. So I was interested in that. But I like Jay Baruchel as well. And I did not know until I sat down to watch this that it's a Matt Johnson picture, in the sense of Matt Johnson of the Dirties, and I forget the name of his faking the moon landing movie,
Operation Avalanche.
Okay, yeah, that was really good too. I've noticed he's done other things since then that I just haven't kept up with, but it really made me go, oh yeah, I like Matt Johnson. I like the Dirties a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And I think he's a likable screen presence and a very kind of natural. He reminds me of different people in different ways, but he's got his own kind of vibe. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was on my radar, but sitting down to watch it, I realized, oh yeah, I'm really curious about it, knowing it's a Matt Johnson movie, because he seems to always have, if not like a meta concept, there's something he's after. He goes for a tone, he gets something, there's something very naturalistic and funny and weird about both of those movies we just mentioned. So I was looking forward to the kind of tone of this, and I think it stands up as that. Like it feels very Matt Johnson. Even the way it's filmed, it felt very scrappy, and I don't know if it was shot on 16 millimeter or something like that, or if it was made to look old or something, but it feels like it doesn't feel like a current day indie movie where everything is like super HD digital feel. I don't know if you felt that way watching it, Ronald.
Yeah. It did have this like sort of old look to it. I think about this Matt Johnson meme of him going like, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like,
yeah.
It's like it's stuck in my brain, but he brings something to the screen that just, I don't know, man. Like, I think talking about movies in terms of budget really does a disservice to it. Because there's like micro budget movies are going to be a thing from now on, and are going to exist on the streaming services, and they're going to PVOD fast. And I think it's a bigger audience for these movies. Like I think the semi biographical movies about technology and people and things like that, are becoming a bigger thing. One thing, because everything at one point was a documentary, right? Like I feel like there was this period where I was watching like 20 documentaries a day about the micro documentaries, the like 10, 15-minute ones, and then the 30-minute ones. And now that they know that there's a space for it, you can make a dramatization of it. And I think that Blackberry really had a pretty insane impact on the market. And it's easy, it's easy to forget that, especially if you're younger, to not think that there was something before the iPhone that still was pretty popular in corporate spaces because of how secure it was. I remember the police department was very big on that, especially I remember a lot of police officers transitioning from Blackberry to iPhone. Like that was a huge concern in the corporate space. How secure are these things? Like, are they going to be able to take these messages that we're sending to each other? It was like a big thing. So this movie really delivers on it. And sometimes it felt like Matt Johnson was kind of putting a hammer down on Blackberry as a brand and what it represented. And maybe it's being too big for its britches, but maybe that's what it was. It kind of felt like that. I thought Glenn Howerton and Jay Baruchel just killed it. Like,
yeah, they're both incredible in the movie.
Incredible. Man, that just like these three in this movie kind of orbiting around each other. Is this going to be? This feels like it could be up for something. Like it feels like
almost no trace of their comic personas either. I actually had to look up Jay Baruchel's age, because I did think he felt young for this character. But then I looked it up, and it's like he's 40 now. This guy was in his mid-30s when this all started. So it's like the guy he's playing. So I was like, well, it's just that Jay Baruchel looks like a kid. He just is one of those guys. I'm not going to hold it against him. If eventually he'll fill out or something, but even then he'll still have that build. And then Glenn Howerton's kind of a similar thing of like, if you watch It's Always Sunny, how funny and high strung Dennis is and how evil he is. But also there's always been this kind of whiff of, where's that career, like that career that Glenn Howerton could have had in movies and as a household name, because I think the guy is that good, so I think that it is interesting seeing him, embrace the sort of douchey side of his persona to play this character, but it is like a dramatic turn that little bits of humor come into it. There's a couple of moments where it's the comic timing of those two guys. You kind of feel it, but most of it is the tension of their different personality types and how that eventually it's going to go bad. Like you just know it from the beginning. And the movie makes them into characters. It makes a point of saying this is a fictionalized version of what happened at the beginning. And I read an interview with the guy, Jim Balsley. Is that his name?
Bowsley.
where he said it took him a minute to get the tone of the movie, and then he realized they were doing a little bit of a satire, and then he said he started to appreciate the story they were telling in the movie. But he said, if you think I could have acted quite that unhinged and gotten the things done that I've gotten done in my career, then you don't know the way business works. But he says for the purposes of a movie, he felt like they kind of nailed the sort of combative nature of the way he ran a business, and it was an interesting interview because he sounded like he was willing to go to the premiere and do the red carpet, but like he didn't want to sit around afterwards and do a Q&A because he doesn't want to be in the position of fact checking the movie, which, I thought sounded kind of gracious in a way, but there's other people involved who have said, no, they don't really want to comment on it. So I do think putting the hammer down is something this movie's doing a little bit. It's not a flattering portrayal. Of these guys, but it is an interesting, the thing it does capture is a moment in time, and I think it's similar to the way Air captured that idea of like the sport, that level of sports merchandising, and that it's still $1 billion industry. I think that what Blackberry does is capture. I mean, they say it in the movie. There's a point where he says, we're going from being the Blackberry to the phone everyone had before they got an iPhone. And I think that that's kind of the way the culture has moved on from this device. But I was a flip phone and then an iPhone, so I didn't ever have the in between. But I knew a lot of people that were into tech and that had Blackberries, and I know that it was huge, especially for like corporate people and business people and stuff like that. So I don't know. I feel like this is yet again one of those little things where it's cool to see. I like it's similar to what we said about Air. I like the fact that we don't get the home life of these characters. We don't find out that one of them has a disapproving father and the other one has a spouse that wonders why they're working so hard. We didn't get any of that. It's about the corporate stuff. It's about the product. It's about the job. I find that to be my favorite part of this kind of subgenre that we're getting, is that it's like, I love that sort of movie where the tension is like people running down the hallway trying to make a deal on the phone. I haven't gotten tired of that yet, that's what I loved on Succession. I loved it on Mad Men. Even though they didn't have portable phones on Mad Men, they had intercoms that could be patched through. So you can run around offices and like figure out who's on whose side. And I think this movie does a good job. From the start kind of who the good guys and who the villains are. But I think you might be a little surprised by the end as to how like Jay Baruchel's character is not as sympathetic as he begins. But throughout the movie, you see signs of like his lack of forceful personality, at least in the way he's characterized in the movie. It becomes a real detriment to the way the business is run.
Yeah, for sure, man.
I think overall too, it's like like you mentioned, like how it didn't really kind of move outside of the orbit of like the product and like the inner circle of those involved that in making it or marketing it or kind of getting it out there. Like you didn't get into the like personal lives of these players. And I think that some of the best stuff in the movie really is, I guess, specifically with Jay Baruchel's character, kind of like the integrity that he had around the people and the product that he had at the beginning. And, that shift through the movie, even when you have, characters coming in like, Michael Ironside's character that comes in for like, operation control and things like that. And, there's conversations about moving production to China. And like, there's all these little things that come up throughout the movie that I think are so specific to like technology and to scale and to where a product, is not able to keep up with demand. And it kind of how that jeopardized and really kind of like everybody basically involved, like sacrifices, all the things that really matter to them, before they find any bit of success with it, whether it's the product itself or them as like an inventor, creator, businessman or woman. I just feel like that was, I think, what works so well in the movie. And honestly, among the three, as much as I loved Air, I think I may have liked Blackberry even more.
I was going to say the same thing, that if we rated these, what did you guys think? But I mean, put this one ahead, just a bit ahead. Yeah,
I would say be Blackberry, Air, Tetris. I mean, I really I liked all three really, but I just felt like this was such and I guess maybe it's because like we all have had that experience of like, even with our time at Apple, like even then when we were there, a lot of companies were still moving off of those devices.
Yes.
So, and even when I left Apple to where I'm at now, there was years that went on where I moved to a role where I was supporting Blackberries and iPhones. and to really kind of have that experience where I never had a BlackBerry, and I was exposed to, like, especially like the last place that it hung on was the corporate culture.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting that in this movie, the corporate culture and the corporation piece of it is really kind of what dismantles the product.
Yeah.
And that element of it, whether it's with the telephone companies and the way they manage their, the minutes to the data, like that whole like transition in history and technology history, I thought was handled so well in the way they kind of framed, why worry about minutes when you're using like free communication that's already existing in the air, like the end-to-end.
Was it Sal Rubinek? Is that actor's name who played like the Bell Atlantic exec?
I think so. Yeah.
Because there's like a series of scenes in that boardroom, and the first one, they're dazzled by the tech guys because this whole idea of this device is so mind blowing.
Yeah.
Then by the second or third time they meet with them, the tables are turning. There's a little bit more of like, well, now we know how we're making money on this and where the service is and like what our networks can maintain. And then by the last time, it's like the telecommunications guys are a little bit at a bit more of an advantage at that point, because they can point to this iPhone that it's like when it hits the movie, it's like Godzilla coming through,
Absolutely.
And honestly, I was going to mention that too, but you brought it up. We all worked for Apple. Well, I worked there when, I don't know if, did you work there when the iPhone came out? But I worked there when it came out. So I remember this weird moment of exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So everybody coming in with a BlackBerry and their new iPhone and saying, how can I do everything I did on this on this? And so it was weird that most everybody in that corporate world had some bizarre attachment to some particular feature that was automatic on the BlackBerry, but that was hard to do on the early iPhones, especially with the application support and stuff. So it was always very funny trying to get someone to be like, I mean, you if you work for Apple, you ran into this with all kind of products, but like getting people to like just get used to this new system, and then within a few years, it wasn't so much that it was the iPhone, but just that it was the smartphone with the touch screen, that was actually the thing that was the revolution, was the computer in your pocket that has a touch screen, because that's when all these different apps and stuff became a possibility. So it was interesting seeing the movie touch on that.
So I worked at CompUSA when the iPhone came out. So I had a very different perspective. This was like, what you got to understand is like, people only thought you could buy the iPhone at the Apple store. So when we sold them, it didn't make any sense to them. They thought it was only $500 at our store, and that we could like the subsidized idea, because we couldn't subsidize them at first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Apple may have been the only people that could at first for us. Like we couldn't do it. Like every phone in the store could be subsidized except for that one. So it was $500 off top. So people were like, fuck, no, I'm not going to buy this thing, but it looks nice. It looks beautiful. It's like a Fisher Price phone. Oh, I was going to say one thing that I really loved about this movie that made me think about these conversations that we had was the other actors in the movie that kind of randomly shined. Sung-Woon Cho, who was one of the workers. It's like the guy behind my left shoulder. I fucking trust that guy.
That moment was great.
It was so good.
And had he hadn't been in the movie much before that. So it's like that was just a big moment. I just love that they gave that moment to a character that we didn't really have much of a reference for. I thought Rich Summers was good too.
Oh man, that's the really cool. The little spot that his assistant had when Rim got a little bigger. It's just these like little moments that are, man. You know what? You know why I think this movie's better than Air. I don't know how else to say this without sounding like an ass, but it's not quite as heightened in like the acting. Like the acting in Air felt a little all over the place, right? Like this felt a little more grounded to me.
Probably so. Maybe so, yeah.
I watched Air like 3 times, and I was like, this is I'm obsessed with sneakers. I love sneakers. I love the story of Michael Jordan and what he did. Right. But you give me a good, fast-paced story, you got me. That'll win every time. The pacing of the movie was better, too, to me.
I really loved, and I think the best part of the movie, I don't know, arguably, is literally the last like 3 minutes of the movie. You know, I mentioned before, like Mike or Jay Baruchel's character, Mike Lazaridis, like his kind of like integrity to the product, and kind of how you see that slipping away through the film as he gets more and more desperate to like show why this device is still worth having 45% of the market share.
Yes.
You know, he gets so desperate. And that last scene, it's even with the credits where he is literally taking apart the phones and fixing that buzzing sound. And
One by
that is
one.
true.
Yeah.
That they had to pay Verizon tons of money for all those storms that were defective because they were produced in China, which was something he fought the entire film. And and that title card about Freegan, who Matt Johnson plays, you know, having sold his stock like the day he saw the iPhone announcer or the day after he saw, like, that's just fucking incredible.
And then he's like quietly one of the richest men in the world.
Yeah, like he's like, you know, and it made him one of the richest men like at that time, and he still is. And like just all those pieces of information, you're just like, this is real life. Like this is what like this whatever fictionalization they did, like these are facts that they portray.
Well, but the reason it works so well, Steve, is because that factoid you just mentioned, that historical fact, is dramatized in a very cinematic way. That final scene of him in the with the shipment in the warehouse or whatever is like heartbreaking.
It's so sad
and intense, and totally alludes to that sort of integrity you're talking about. But it reminds me of, I can't think of other instances off the top of my head, but I know we've seen it where like someone who's lost touch with their essence kind of is like scrambling to get back in touch with their essence at the end. Do you know what I mean? Like he's trying to get back to the one thing that was like his thing he really liked to do at the beginning, which was like figure out where that hissing was coming from or that buzz or whatever. So I think that, no, I didn't know that was, I didn't know the history of the product or, you know, all that stuff about the storm, but I quickly did a little research and found that, that was true, that there were so many defective ones. But I loved the way they dramatized him, like almost acting like he's actually going to fix it himself, you know, like that it's up to him, even though that's madness. And I think that's why that works so well for me as a closing idea. Also, so often the title cards, or the whatever you want to call them, the bio facts they give at the end of these things, the epilogue, so often those feel tagged on, or like, I don't know that this movie really stands up to it. But this was one of the best examples of like giving us a little character note that felt true to each character. I mean, like you find out that, you know, certain things about the other two main guys that just feel good, like feel right with the story that you saw. Well put together drama. And, you know, it does retain some of that kind of found footage or docu, whatever that thing is that Matt Johnson does in his movies that I've seen that he does well, is like create some sense of that you're eavesdropping on human behavior.
Cool. That's a go ahead, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, unanimous. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, I was excited to talk about it because I thought it was great. Yeah. And just to plug a podcast real quick, I don't know if you guys listen to the Ringer podcast, the Big Picture, with Sean Fennessy. If you liked Blackberry or want to hear more about it, he had Matt Johnson on like the week after it released.
Oh, cool.
And it's just, he's an incredible, like, just great interview. Like he's very nuts and bolts, especially if you want to like talking about the filmmaking of the movie and it being a Canadian production, and you know what it means for Canada and like how it's performing there and here and what that all means and the budgets and things like that. Just a really cool inside baseball conversation about movies of this type, budget, you know, all these things, because you know we don't see a lot of movies like this anymore that get like wide or semi-wide releases. You know, a movie that's budget's like 5 million or less, that's not a horror movie. But yeah, the Big Picture with Sean Fennessy, it's on the Ringer podcast network. But it came out, I want to say probably the end of May, early June. But yeah, it's with Matt Johnson. If you want to listen more about him talk about Blackberry.
No, I think I would like to hear him talk about it. Just in general, I think he's in. And also, I believe we've talked about the Dirties on the show way back. Yeah. But if you're a new listener and you don't remember that recommendation, I think that I think it would probably still hold up.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh, maybe because both of us are, do you want to talk about Extraction too, or you want to wait till the end?
Well, let's get to the pick. Who's required viewing? Who's up next?
Oh yes,
it's me.
Okay,
I'm next.
It's me.
So I listed all. I was curious about. I was starting. You know, I like to figure out like boring information about stuff, statistical information. So I started listing all the required viewings we've done thus far, and looked at different years and that are like maybe a couple choices from that year, and then like different years that we haven't done a choice from. So I was looking at that and thinking about what my next choice would be. And I've actually got some things on my list that I want to do for required viewing. And my list has gotten ridiculously long with movies that I just want to see because I haven't seen them, then I feel like I should. And then sometimes movies that I haven't seen in a long time. And then I can't believe the movie that I'm about to select, it doesn't really fit any of those categories. This is a movie that I only saw once, and I didn't really like it when I saw it, but I could accept that maybe I would view it differently now. But I thought it would be fun to talk about this movie, and it comes from a year that is unrepresented, and it's kind of in the summer movie vibe.
Okay.
And if next week we have a little Indiana Jones talk, this feels like it might be a fun movie to pair with that. And it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, so those things always add up.
Let's go.
I think we're going to talk about Last Action Hero from 1993.
Let's do it. This film's having a little bit of a moment right now. I don't know if you guys...
It's like 30 years, I think.
Well, not just that, but I don't know if you've watched the Arnold docuseries on Netflix, which...
No, how is it?
Real quick, it's incredible. Like,
okay.
Yeah, must watch if you're any kind of or any level of Arnold fan, like, because it's the way it's kind of segmented into like his bodybuilding, Hollywood, and political, careers and successes and failures. It's incredible. It's really, really good. I loved Arnold growing up as a kid. And I still do. Like, I still love watching a lot of those movies. But on that series, a lot of like there's a segment that's kind of gone viral about the failure of Last Action Hero.
Oh, wow.
And like it's, being a bit ahead of its time and finding an audience later, like basically in the last decade. And really just like how much that failure crushed him. Like it really kind of sank his... in his eyes, his Hollywood career for a while.
Wow.
But no, it's a great pick. I remember, this was like, Arnold at his peak in the 90s, early 2000s, 90s. And like, what is this meta action, movie? I remember seeing it. Oh man, I'm excited to rewatch this. I won't get too far into it, but that's a good one.
Yeah, like I said, I've saw it in the theaters 30 years ago, so this will be a total attempt to reconnect. But I just avoid. I knew when I pictured how much fun we've always had talking about Schwarzenegger movies, especially the classic ones. I don't know what it is about that topic that is always so fun with you guys. So yes, let's do it. Let's go back to 1993.
That's a great pick. I mean,
Last Action Hero.
You are setting me up for goodness, because guess what just got remastered pretty recently? You guessed it. Fucking Last Action Hero.
How many Ks?
Just 4 Ks.
How many do you need, John? Also, it's a good timing for your pick because it's on Netflix through July 1st.
Oh wow.
So if you have Netflix, if you check out the Arnold docuseries, or you want to get this in before it leaves, we'll have it on the show next week. But it's just under the gun. The deadline is, I see as I pull it up, last day to watch on Netflix, July 1. So get on that if you got a Netflix subscription, or you could find the remastered version that Ronald just mentioned.
I'm looking on iTunes, I actually own it, and it just got upgraded to 4K with Atmos. Man, iTunes, guys, if you are digital collectors, use iTunes. Your movies will be upgraded. My Avatar just got upgraded. I bought it for $7.99, just got upgraded to 4K. Use iTunes. That's all advice I'm going to give you guys.
All right. So yeah, great pick. We'll talk about Last Action Hero next week. But yes, Ronald, back to your question. Let's talk about Extraction 2 quickly, and then we'll jump into No Hard Feelings. So did you watch Extraction 2? You said you watched it as well, right?
I did.
Okay.
They should have called it Extraction as well.
Yeah, as I say, I don't want. Did you watch Extraction 2 too?
Did you watch Extraction as well too?
Yeah,
in a 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. So I will listen and learn. But I've heard there's an amazing like oneer or like action scene that's like a long action scene in this.
Yeah,
I keep hearing people talk about some particular scene.
I feel like Extraction. Did you enjoy Extraction? Just quick.
No,
you didn't. Okay,
no.
So I did. I always felt like Extraction was like, I mean, it was one of Netflix's like biggest movies. Yeah. Like they always talk about it, but like it's one of those things where I had no expectations, and it was like that era or that time where like all the MCU stars were like, are they going to have something that's successful?
Yeah.
That's like their thing. Like, sure, Chris Evans was in Knives Out, but that's not his thing. You know, he's an ensemble. But then Extraction was on Netflix, and it was like a monster hit for them at the time. Like, I think it was their top viewed movie, and it had been replaced since then. And that was like genuinely a Chris Hemsworth like action vehicle. Like, it was some massive action movie. And I just like had no expectations because like no one was making good movies that were coming out of the MCU on their own. That I thought really.
I didn't hate it.
I was surprised by it. Yeah, I remember.
You didn't love Dr. Dolittle?
No.
I didn't.
I'm looking forward to its sequel though.
Dr.
But yeah, I just remember watching it and being like, that really surprised me. And what stood out really was simply like just the action, just like period. Like,
man.
It's that thing where like I thought the movie was fine, and I think Chris Hemsworth is an action star, and I do think that of all of them, he's probably the action star of the crew.
Yeah,
and I think that like that movie was a really good showcase for him. To be that. And I don't know. I just remember watching it on Netflix with Erin one night, just, man, let's watch this. And she loves him. So we were both like really surprised by how much we liked it.
Yeah.
But you know, its success ultimately was like, no question, they're going to make another one of these movies.
Yeah.
But like the director, Sam Hargrave? Like he was a second unit director for the Infinity War Endgame film.
Oh, okay.
So like, that's the whole tie-in with Agbo and the Russo brothers, because they wrote these movies, or at least one or both of them wrote these movies. But he did a lot of the like the final action sequences in like Infinity War, like most notably like Thor coming to Wakanda. Like that whole sequence, arguably the best in the movie, like he shot that. So that's kind of how he got his like, you know, reputation, I guess, and what got him Extraction, just for some backstory. So he definitely comes from more of an action stunt choreography, much like Chad Stahelski does for the John Wick films or anything like that. But I don't know, like I was really surprised how much I liked Extraction, and I gotta say, I really liked Extraction too. I felt like they spent enough time kind of telling us why that character would be returning for a sequel, like the Tyler Rake character that Chris Hemsworth plays. It feels very much to me like some mashup of like, honestly, like a lot of those 90s action movies, you know, with what we look for in some of these more like, I guess, popular, successful action films like of the last 5 years, things like John Wick specifically, or like Atomic Blonde or Nobody, like these films that have like really great action sequences that are choreographed and have great stunt work. But I don't know, like I just kind of went into this being like, I'm curious how they give me logic of why this guy goes on. And I think that there was enough there for that. And yes, John, there is like a 22-minute like quote unquote oneer, which is like a prison break sequence. That is not a true oneer. I watched like a behind the scenes thing, and it is stitched. But in essence, it's a one shot, you know, kind of narrative piece of the story that is really, really impressive. But yeah, I don't know, like what did you think of it? Did you like it, or like, I mean, more or less than the first, or like where did you fall on it?
Well, you know, I hadn't seen anything about the trailer for the second one, but I knew that it was out. I saw the poster. You mentioned it. I was like, look, I have enough time that I could sit down with this for a couple hours.
Yeah.
I turned it on. I'm like, man, this doesn't sound great. I had to crank it up a little bit. And what I realized was like, okay, this is the volume. Typically I will keep it at like out of 80, I want to say 90. I'll keep it on like a 60 or 50 when I'm watching a movie. I had to turn this up to 80 in order to feel like the sound. I mean, this is a direct sequel to the first one. So, I mean, you know, I knew the story. I remember the end when he jumps into the water and all that stuff. This movie was so much better than the first that it made me feel weird. I was like, is this the same series? Like, what did I miss? Like, to the point where I want to go back to the first one. I'm like, I didn't like the first one that much. Why do I like this one so much?
Right.
And some of it is like, you know, like Steve was saying, like there's a shift that's happened. The inspiration from like martial arts and things like that. Things are shot differently. People fight differently in movies. Like, they respect the idea that like people wouldn't come at you one at a time. They would come, they figure out a way to kind of make it look like it's a little more chaotic than just one-on-one fights, which a lot of those 90s movies kind of embraced. And that is something that kind of was borrowed from like, foreign films and became really popular with like gun fu and stuff like that. It's existed before John Wick, obviously, but John Wick is the blueprint for a lot of those movies.
Right.
So it almost took everything that it had from the first movie and combined some of that gun fu. And what you get is like an extraordinarily fun movie. I mean, the prison scene, John, you may have seen it in the trailer. I'm gonna just say, you know what I'm talking about, Steve. He's blocking a Molotov and his fucking hand catches on fire. And he basically looks like Ryu or Ken. And he's beating the living shit out of people with a fiery hand.
With a firearm.
Yeah.
Literally a firearm.
This is what I want from a movie. It's just like that kind of fun shit. The dynamic with the characters is really fun. Some of the characters from the last film. Does he have a romantic situation with that character? Is that like a thing? With
the sister.
Yeah.
Well, that's his ex-wife.
No, not her. His part. I mean, the group that he works with.
Like their little group. Just no, not like a romantic thing. It's just like they're like best.
Okay.
I mean, maybe there's something there, but I mean, like they're like it's his like confidant. Like they're like that for each other. Yeah.
It's really cool. It's like if the guys from Mission Impossible were fighting in the field with them. Like it just is a really cool thing, especially to see women kicking ass the way that this woman demolishes people in this movie. It's just fun. And just when you calm down, you're like, oh, the scene's done. A helicopter will come.
I mean, honestly, that's like the thing about the movie is that, it's a little over 2 hours and I feel like you really don't get much of a breath in the movie. Like, with the exception of the beginning where it kind of gives the logic of why there's a sequel or how there's a sequel based on how the first one ends.
Yeah.
Beyond that and some stuff with the family that is kind of the center of this rescue mission.
Yeah.
It moves really fast. And I like what you said too about like the group really kind of getting involved in what was going on. Like Nick and Yaz, the guy and the girl that's a part of his crew, and like having their own moments of like some pretty badass action sequences. It's not just all Hemsworth. I mean, this is a Hemsworth thing, but he is the action, like he's an action star. Like
he is.
And this is one of those Netflix movies where the moment I got like an hour into it, I was like, yep, they left a ton of money on the table if they had put this movie in the theater. Because this is a movie that would have been amazing to see on a big screen. And like you even mentioning the sound stuff, my sound mix sounded like pretty standard, like in terms of what I listened to it at. But I mean, all of the action and the guns and like like especially when that prison sequence or even in the end when they're in this like high-rise tower and there's like helicopters coming in, attacking them from outside. Like the sound mix is just pretty amazing and
really good.
It's just one of those. It's definitely better than the first one, and I like the first one.
Yeah.
And it's just in every way. I think it's bigger. It's more aggressive. It's got better action.
Yeah.
And he's really good in the movie. Like Chris Hemsworth is great in this movie.
The emotional beats, he just really is on point, man. Like there's parts where, it should feel slow, but he's just kind of processing a thing. More action comes.
Yeah, I know.
He gets a little emotional. You're like, damn, I feel really sorry for him. More action comes. And nothing ever lingers long enough. The only person I didn't like was that little kid. I fucking didn't like that kid. But I mean, you're meant to kind of feel like this teenager's trying to find his way in the world.
Yeah.
But the villains in the movie, I don't know how anybody could afford 150 armed men that are super muscular coming at you with every single gun and helicopter that you possibly have. I mean, that's a little weird that they're like, that guy from before? Oh, he's big now. He's like, oh my God, he has assassins everywhere. But it's fun, man. It really works itself out. And then the final battle gets smaller. It goes from it's small and then it gets big and then it gets small again. And then when it gets really small, it's like, oh man, like it feels rewarding. It works itself out. And there's somebody in it that I wasn't expecting. I guess I didn't see him in the trailer.
I think it's a surprise. Don't spoil it.
Okay, yeah, cool surprise. I don't know how the fuck they got this guy, this really famous guy. No, I'm just swear, but
yeah, it's not in any of the marketing. It was definitely a surprise, and it's a cool surprise, and it even like kind of teases more to come.
Yeah,
with that character and that actor,
to the point where I thought that he was going to say his name was a very specific name. I was like, is this world connected to another world?
I know.
But anyway,
I know.
Yeah,
I think I may have heard something about this, but either way, I think
okay.
It's okay. Yeah, it's
We'll do it off.
Anything I say, but ruins the spoiler, non-spoiler thing you guys are doing. So yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely a go ahead for me, and I think it's one of the
fuck head. Please,
it's definitely one of Netflix's better. I think it's one of Netflix's better original films. Period. But agree. Definitely like their action movies that always do really well, like all the big ones that are like the top viewed ones that they always tout about, like the Red Notice and whatever the hell else, all this is definitely better than any of that. Yeah, like this is a solid, entertaining, fast moving spectacle of an action movie, and I'm excited for the third one whenever they make it. I can't wait.
Oh man, can I give a quick shout out Netflix stuff? My friend Cammie Farmer is on the new season of Black Mirror. She's in the episode with Salma Hayek. I wanted to say congratulations, Cammie. I'm really happy for you. It's the Joan is Awful episode
right.
6. She's on the screen. I don't want to give anything away, but she's on the computer screen in the episode, acting beside Salma Hayek.
Okay.
Yeah, super crazy. She didn't really say anything. I guess she couldn't because of it, non-disclosure shit. And then she just popped up. I'm like, holy shit,
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, congrats. But see that movie.
What's that?
See that movie. See Extraction 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I thought the Black Mirror season was pretty good. I got one more to go, but okay. I've at least liked all of them. Some of them have been really good.
I need to watch them all, but I've heard it's I'm always interested in, we've talked about how much we're kind of suckers for anthology shows, and the Black Mirror thing they do is a particular kind of thing, and you can be in the mood for it or not. But I've heard this season's a little stronger than the last one.
I think overall probably is.
People are really mad about it, but but I agree. It feels like the Black Mirror the British one. It feels like that energy.
Right.
It got kind of away from that once Netflix America started making stuff. But this it's strong as shit to me. Like it really feels like it's getting to what made Black Mirror special, which is kind of like this dystopian sort of, everything's the same except for one thing is really crazy and
it's way off.
Yeah, and then it gets like Russian Doll about it. Yeah, that's just kind of the formula, and it works really well in this season. So.
It always sucks. It just sucks. It's like 5 episodes, like that massive weight.
Yeah.
And it's 5 episodes. And I kind of feel like it kind of peaks early and towards the middle of this season. But I mean, like overall, though, I think most of them were at least entertaining.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, Black Mirror season 6 is on Netflix as well. Yeah. Okay, so then we kind of did it in reverse a little bit, but let's talk about No Hard Feelings for a little bit, John. This is the big, again, like I said, Jennifer Lawrence is probably the biggest name that you would know in this movie. But this is
people of a certain age might know Matthew Broderick, but yeah, Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, Matthew Broderick, right?
Unquestionably the biggest name in this. So
Laura Benanti, some people may remember. I know her, from Broadway stuff she's done, but also she was on The Detour on TV. If you ever watched that comedy series, but No Hard Feelings is in theaters now. This is a big studio R-rated comedy, which, like I said, we don't get. Really, period.
Big is right though. I looked; it's a $45 million budget, which kind of surprised me.
Wow,
that's something I want to talk about the movie in general, but also I was thinking about it earlier when we were mentioning Air, and like Air's success or not success based on like its budget and like what it was, what Amazon bought it for. And I think that's like a whole nother conversation. And even like Elemental is in the conversation because of its box office performance and what it costs to make. It's like this overall.
So it's The Flash, which we've talked about in our last.
I mean, but I guess that's like a superhero movie. So I'm just like, you kind of like expect these big budgets from them. But I don't know. I was like shocked that the budget for this was 45. I was shocked that the budget for Air was 90.
Yeah.
You know, like Elemental's budget's $200 million. You know, like it's just that stuff is out of control.
It is.
And I feel like in a lot of cases, versus a movie like Blackberry made for less than $5 million, it's like some of these movies, they're just set up to fail. You know, like there's not a support system, and specifically with No Hard Feelings, again, like I said, a type of movie that we don't see really ever anymore. Just comedies in general really aren't coming out in theaters or marketed as straight comedies anymore, which this one is and has been marketed as. But I feel like, you know, the support system for that kind of film is just not there. So like,
do you think she's the kind of star that can open a movie? Or like, is that the swing? Is she the kind of star that can open this kind of movie? Like, because that she does have the star power. We were talking about this after we watched it. There is something about a star of this magnitude who you haven't seen in a bunch of things recently, and there's no question she commands the screen, and like, you know, you love to watch her in a movie like this. But seeing that it cost $45 million, I felt my heart sink a little bit, because I was like, no, this movie is kind of charming. I don't know that it's going to like draw people in, but is she that kind of star? You know, is she one of those people who still has that kind of star power?
I don't think so. I mean, I think she is a star, but I think it's all relative. I don't think that star equals box office anymore. You know, I don't think that equates the way it did, you know, 90s, early 2000s. I mean, even 10 years ago. I mean, it's so different now. And I think that she's never really proven herself as a box office draw outside of the franchises that, you know, she kind of shepherded, you know, success with, you know, like the Hunger Games movies or the X-Men films, and even like Passengers with Chris Pratt. Like, you know, that I think that was the only non-IP one that of hers that got past $100 million, but that's also a huge sci-fi summer blockbuster. Her Pratt at maybe, you know, him coming off of Guardians and Jurassic World, you know, those were factors that I think helped that movie to succeed. But yeah, I mean, she's never been the box office draw. You know, like her biggest movie is the Hunger Games movies, probably. Although Don't Look Up is a movie of hers on Netflix. You know, that doesn't equate the box office, but it's like Netflix's #2 movie of all time. But I don't know that means anything for an R-rated comedy coming out in theaters, especially when you hear that the budget's $45 million. I mean, I would be shocked if this movie makes more than 15, 20 million in opening weekend. It's probably more like 10 to 15, which is disappointing because I thought the movie was really good. I thought it was
very funny,
really funny, really sweet. And again, I keep saying it, but it's just the kind of movie that you don't get to watch very much anymore. And it hits a lot of those like bullet points of things in movies that I love, which is, you know, John and I were talking about this, like there are multiple moments in the movie where like you just like it kind of gets you, you know, it's like an emotional beat or a character beat that kind of is another gear for a character in this story. And both of them, you know, have it in the movie. I think the guy's name is Andrew Barth Feldman, who plays the main character, the young guy Percy. And that's like it makes it so much better when that works with the performances and with the actors or actresses involved. And I think they both do a great job. But especially her, I mean, like I turned to John when we were done with the movie. I was like, I kind of just love Jennifer Lawrence. Like I just, you know, you don't want to say she's just gorgeous and she's so fun.
That's how lame I am. I was going to turn to you after the movie and say, she's so beautiful.
Right. It's like, it's so hard. It's so hard not to watch her. Yes. And it is because she's beautiful, but she's also just
she's right. She's got this great,
she's so charismatic,
extremely funny.
And she plays extremely funny in the movie. And really, like, this movie is the showcase of like, she does not give a fuck. Like, she is down to do whatever it takes
like
to make
you think you know
laugh.
what we mean, Ronald, but there's moments in this movie that they don't spoil in the trailer that are like, wow, that's just, again, it's the sign of an actor going for it. And it took like, it's where you go, okay, she's also kind of always a producer on her movie. Like she's the kind of person who wouldn't do a role like this without being fully on board for what it is. And when you see what it is, it's got some I don't know, some things I think that surprised a lot of folks watching the film. So that's
totally.
That's kind of funny. But the movie has moments like that. When you talk about it being R-rated, that's significant because it is like a coming of age story for a kid, and it's a coming of age story for like an arrested development adult, you know. So it's like both of them. The reason why that's the setup could be so creepy, and the movie leans into the creepy factor of, is this age disparity, is it making us uncomfortable? The kid's not a child, he's 19, she's not old, she's like 32, but that age difference, if it were a man who was older and a 19-year-old girl, I think we would all be completely skeeved out, you know. And this movie does own up to that, but work hard both to make her the kind of person who seems like she's kind of a creep, but also that she's not. She's just kind of a normal person in some ways. And there's a little bit of economic anxiety that they work into it, with her being a person who's trying to make ends meet, and this kid being a kid who's never had to worry about anything because his parents are loaded.
Wow.
And so the movie doesn't lean hard into that stuff, but it's there the whole time. And I think that the viewer sees it and recognizes it. And sometimes even the comedy comes from the fact that for her, this situation has much higher stakes than it might seem, you know. And it's one of those movies where there's a secret that, you know, the whole movie is going to come out. And so I sometimes dread that, like when it's like, when are they going to, but I think the way this movie played that moment was actually, there's like a dinner scene that's very funny. That's like also sad and kind of dark. And Steve, when you mentioned the kid's name, I laughed because I remembered that moment when they were meeting in the bar and somebody breaks the pool balls on a pool table behind him, and the sound of it makes him jump like it was a gunshot or something.
He's like, ah!
I keep thinking about that moment. The kid does that moment so great, but he's great.
Moment.
Yeah.
Allowed.
But she is, you know, we know her, we know how good she can be. I thought the kid did a good job of like matching her in a totally different comic energy, you know, like he's like a young actor, but I thought it was interesting how he held the screen opposite someone with such a strong screen presence, especially when he's kind of playing someone who's being overwhelmed by somebody. I thought it was great that he managed to find comic beats in there that still came through. This is not like a loud, brash comedy, but it definitely has those moments where, you know, it's going for something, those big laughs that I think you associate with comedies like this ever since like Something About Mary or something. You're expecting a couple of like, what the fuck moments, you know, from a comedy like this. And I think Matthew Broderick even being there is like a little bit of a meta spin because, you know, back in the day, he would have been one of the younger people in a movie like this. And so he's funny.
He's the guy. Yeah.
And let's talk about Scott MacArthur, I said he's the guy who can now play the Ike Barinholtz role. But you've seen him and stuff, Ronald. I don't know what the reference point for you would be, but do you remember the guy he was the villain in El Camino? The guy who held Jesse prisoner, kind of.
I think so.
You've definitely seen him in other things.
He was in the Mick. Did you watch the Mick with Caitlin Olsen? Or he was in Righteous Gemstones.
Did watch Righteous Gemstones?
As Scotty.
Yeah, he's Scotty.
Yeah.
Oh, he's in this.
Yeah. But I mean, he's like
I love Righteous Gemstones,
but you know how rom-com coming of age stories always have like the funny guy who's lurking around. He's that guy. He's the guy who they cut to when they need a good laugh, or he like leaves a scene before the dramatic conversation starts up. But he's good for it. And it's that there's a formula, but I think it also stepped outside of the formula in a couple of interesting ways that just made it. Maybe it is the fact that it's not a romance between the main characters, but it is still kind of like you see them kind of falling for each other, and you see that in a different world, like. She's a little immature and he's a little too held back, and so like the way they influence each other is the way that characters influence each other in a romantic comedy. But it's not to call it that would be a little inaccurate. But no, it's very funny. And I kind of knew what you mean, Steve. When I saw that budget, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if this movie could be the kind of success it would need to be to justify that budget or to represent now these types of movies are back. I just don't know that anybody knows right now what to release in theaters and how much to spend on it. It's a weird time for our favorite really industry.
I got to say though, man, you know, we talk about it all the time with like horror movies. There is something amazing about seeing a great comedy or a really good comedy with an audience. Like you mentioned it when we sat down, John. It was like, oh, this looks like a good crowd. Like it's packed. And, you know, like, and the movie plays really well to an audience. And I mean, even today we're recording this on a Wednesday It's got a 61% on Rotten Tomato critic score, but like a 95 or 97% audience
Wow.
score. And it really genuinely is like an audience pleaser. Like people were laughing constantly during this movie. And just listening to people walk out of the theater or overall, like people were really, really enjoyed it. And I did too. And I was telling, friends of mine today, like, if you can go see it, like support it if you can. Cause again, they don't make them. And hopefully if if it performs somewhat success of whatever that metric is, maybe we'll get some more of them. I know there's another comedy coming out this summer, that one with the talking dogs. That's like a raunchy
Oh yeah, it looks funny.
Strays.
Yeah, I've actually heard that's really funny. A couple friends of mine have seen it actually, and they thought it was hilarious. But I don't know. I just hope it finds some level of success. I do think audiences will enjoy this movie, and again, it's awesome seeing a comedy and laughing. That communal experience that we talk about with theater sometimes that you can't really replicate at home. Different, the apples and oranges through and through. But I mean, I just think that it is an opportunity to see something that's pretty funny, and she's a star, and we need to kind of support these kinds of things if you want to see more movies like this. If you're tired of, and I'm not saying that I am, but if you're tired of the same kinds of movies in theaters all the time, this is a different kind of movie that we don't get in theaters a whole lot. So if you're looking for a really solid comedy, especially anything like R-rated that's not like super safe, yeah, man, it's a go ahead for me again. Like I really, and the more I think about it, the more I enjoyed it, and I'm just really happy to see Jennifer Lawrence back on the big screen because I really am a fan.
Cool.
What else? Anything else? I know we kind of flipped it a little bit in terms of the other stuff that we watched. Was there anything else you guys wanted to mention having watched before we wrap up?
I don't mind.
A couple things. You mentioned Righteous Gemstones. It's back. Two episodes into the season, and it's definitely back. It's definitely
Great.
Righteous Gemstones.
Great. Yeah.
I love Tim Baltz. He's becoming one of my favorite. He plays BJ.
Yeah.
And also Steve Zahn is like a perfect fit for the world and tone of this show. Like when you see this, that's that kind of show too, where when somebody pops up in a guest role, it was like Eric Andre last year, where you're just like, oh, of course that person can come play in this playground and fit in. And speaking of movies in the theater that you don't necessarily see this type of movie, after seeing No Hard Feelings, Steve, I actually had a little time today free, and I was like, I'm going to pop in for a matinee, and I saw the Nicole Holofcener, Julia Louis-Dreyfus movie, You Hurt My Feelings.
Yeah.
And it was decent. I have to say that I was like, you know what? I need to see more movies that are just about people sitting in rooms talking. I liked that. And then it was a little mild, and it's a funny thing. If you catch a matinee at the Charles Theater here in Baltimore during the week, you will be there with like just a different age demographic than I'm normally in a movie with. Yeah. And there was so much like amused chuckling at this movie that when I wasn't chuckling, that it didn't really turn me against the movie, because it is like a charming and kind of grounded movie, but it made me think repeatedly how much it doesn't have the laughs. Right. It's much more of a dramedy. I don't know. I've never really had this thought before of watching a movie and feeling like the people were too privileged. Like something about No Hard Feelings, they set up stakes for the character that, whether it's like contrived or not, it at least makes you feel like there's some reason why you're watching this period of this person's life.
Yeah.
Whereas You Hurt My Feelings has a inciting incident in it that it takes like a half hour to get to, and then it doesn't necessarily focus on it. It's like, I don't know, if you know the hook of it, it's a woman overhears her husband telling the truth about her latest book that she wrote. And she hears that he didn't like it, but he's been telling her to her face that he likes it. And so that seems like it could really get at some interesting, like, unraveling of trust in a relationship, but it doesn't. It's like there's 3 or 4 subplots that take up just as much screen time, and they keep coming back to it. And she's more hurt and pouty than she is like doing vindictive, petty things, which seems like that's where the comedy of errors would kick in, would be she starts acting out, or doing things against her husband. But instead, it's more like her feelings are hurt, which is the name of the movie. But what the movie does get into that's really interesting, and again, not very funny, but thought-provoking, is just that idea of people you love. And it reminds me of something Nikki and I used to say when we used to watch American Idol, and we were terrible people. We watched those early episodes when
when people were
messing
up,
when people messing up and the judges being mean and all that stuff. They don't even do that on the show anymore. It's a much more supportive, loving atmosphere on that show. But in the early days, you might watch those episodes to see terrible singers told they were terrible.
Yeah.
And you would see the look on their face as though it's the first time anyone told them they were terrible, you know? And I used to say it's a public service, as sad as it is. It's a public service to hear that maybe your family's been telling you you're great and encouraging you.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not honesty, you know? And this movie is all about that space between being honest with someone you love and supporting them and encouraging someone you love, especially if someone you love is a creative person. And I think all three of us on this call are creative people. So we know you don't assume everyone who cares about you loves what you put out, right?
Right.
But you assume that they see you're trying and that they respect you for putting forth the effort or whatever. And then you know there are those people who really get what you're doing, and it would break your heart to think that person was lying to your face and saying, I love it. But in most cases, you recognize people say the polite thing. Well, this movie gets all into that and blows it up from a few different angles. But I still feel like that aspect could have been more focused on, and it could have more explored that uncomfortable place of like, can you trust anybody? And what does it mean to be totally trusting? And is real honesty what you want in every situation anyway? I don't know. I think the movie gets at that stuff, but it kind of scratches at it in a very vague sense that makes you feel like you almost come away from it feeling like these people don't really have problems. But the movie, you know, the acting, whatever, it's of a quality. The dialogue is funny. It gets you there. It's just not there's not like these huge moments that I was maybe expecting from a movie with this premise. But it's to your point, Steve, it's an A24 movie. It's in theaters still after being out in the, you know, like limited run, I guess, but it's been out for 4 or 5 weeks here in Baltimore. So there's something to be said about, you know, a little indie comedy sticking around in the theaters and not going straight to VOD. But I don't know. Actually, let me look and see real quick before I wrap up this topic. Just how has it done box office wise? Let me just look. Okay, so it cost, it doesn't say, but it's made 4.7 million, and it's an A24 movie. I guess they're pretty smart. I mean, it feels like it's super like low budget. There's absolutely nothing, you know, in No Hard Feelings, you at least feel like there's set pieces that they might need effects and stunt people for and stuff. This movie has none of that. So I could believe that You Hurt My Feelings is a success at bringing in 4.7 million, but I don't know what it cost. So anyway, I think people probably know Nicole Holofcener's films. She makes movies like this that are sort of dramedies with good actors in them, and so you know, you every now and then you get some really great dialogue and some really interesting character work. But this one felt like it almost crested the hill for me, but didn't quite make it over, despite all the talent on display.
Right on. I wanted to mention one more real quick. Oh, I went and saw Transformers: Rise of the Beast.
Oh, wow.
And I gotta say, like, I'm just a fan of the series. Like, they're not good. You know, a lot of them aren't good. I do think like 2 or 3 of them are really good. I really like Bumblebee a few years back. And I kind of like this one too, honestly. Like, this is in the conversation with the original one and Bumblebee and maybe Dark of the Moon, like for like the better of the series. But this one is also a prequel to the first Transformers, so this takes place in the 90s. And Anthony Ramos is like the lead human character, as they always have one of those, and I think he's really good in it. Some really interesting, you know, some fun voice acting. Pete Davidson plays Mirage, which I think ends up. I by the end of the movie, I was like, I bought into it. Initially, I was like, I don't know about this, but it grew on me through the movie. But yeah, overall, I mean, like, if you like Transformers movie, this is definitely one of the better Transformers movies, and you know, by no means a great film. But I actually went because Sydney wanted to see it. She's watched the Transformers movies with me, and I kind of, you know, we ride the rides at Universal, and she loves Bumblebee, and Bumblebee's in it.
Yeah. So I love the like random Transformer walking around that like talks to you. In
yeah, in Universal. Yeah.
So good.
Those are really cool. It's like, it's either like it's always Optimus or Bumblebee or oh my god, what's his name? The Decepticon from the first one. I don't know, whatever. The big guy from the big bad from the first one, Megatron. They're Transformers movies. Like I love the like seeing the things transform into Transformers. I don't even care. Like I just love it. And some of the slow motion action, the Bay isms that were so popular from the first couple of movies at least. They're laced throughout this movie as well. But the introduction of like the whole idea of like the Beast Wars and like those characters being introduced was really cool. And I think Ron Perlman voices and Michelle Yeoh voices one of them, and it's a really interesting cast in terms of the voice acting. But again, it's a Transformers movie, but I just want to say it's one of the better Transformers movies, top 2 or 3, I don't know, in that conversation.
I heard it has a wild twist. I don't know.
It does, dude. I don't want to say it. I'll tell you off mic if you want to know it.
No. I want to watch it.
It kind of blew my mind a little bit at the end, and but then I was like, but what does it mean? Like, why? It's this kind of thing. Like, will this actually happen?
Okay,
kind of things. Like, it's almost like they're dangling a carrot out there to see if anybody wants this.
That's crazy. Okay,
I'm gonna tell you, I was like jaw open kind of thing. Like not even like it matters, but it was more of it's more of the swing that a studio is taking.
Okay.
When they have this little tag or little like twist kind of thing at the end of this movie and this story. There's like a little carrot dangling. Like, do you guys want this? Do you guys want to see this? Let us know.
Well, I mean, nowadays that's almost dangerous to do anything that feels like you're promising something, because plans change, everything falls apart these days. Nothing's guaranteed. But did you like Bumblebee?
I did.
How does this compare to Bumblebee? Because I liked Bumblebee.
Me too.
I think you would like it. Yeah, I think it's definitely. It's kind of like a mix of the Bumblebee and like the first Transformers movie in terms of the scope and character stuff. Like I felt like Bumblebee was much smaller and it really kind of focused more on, the relationship with like that Transformer and Haley and like kind of her place in this whole insane battle of Autobots and Decepticons and all this shit. But like, I think this kind of gets back to some of the bigger scope of the other movies. But the Anthony Ramos character and he has like a little brother in it, and there's another character, Dominic Fishback is the other lead in the film. It's not as like kind of silly as some of the other Transformers movies are, at least with the characters that are human. I mean, there are kind of silly parts in it, but I don't know. I would probably say it's kind of like an in between in terms of like the vibe of the movie. It's almost like Bumblebee didn't make enough money, so they're like, we got to get back to a little bit of the Bay verse.
Right.
But we know what people liked about Bumblebee, so can we kind of migrate that over a little bit? But I really like Anthony Ramos a lot. Like I think
me too.
I do think he's a star if he kind of finds the right projects. I thought he was great in The Heights, and I want to see him in more things. But this is a huge movie for him, and I don't know, he was really good in it, and yeah, man, I gotta say I left the theater feeling pretty good, not just because of the little tease at the end, but I just like Transformers, man. I've always liked Transformers.
Well, I've enjoyed it I haven't watched them all, and I think Bumblebee's the only one of the last few I've seen, but just from the trailers and the footage I've seen, they've gotten back around to what I think they should have done from the start with like the designs. The designs look more like the characters from the cartoon that I liked when I was a kid, and less like a realistic attempt to represent what parts would be there if a truck person turned in. Sure. The first couple movies, it's like the character designs were so busy and almost hard to look at because they were trying to realistically show how all these pieces could whir around. And I feel like now they're like, no, it ends up being like a pleasantly humanoid looking, like Optimus Prime looks like he's supposed to look to me. And the Beast Wars or whatever, those characters that I've seen, that was a little bit after my time collecting the toys.
Maximals. Yeah.
But those designs, the Maximals, of course, the legendary Maximals.
I mean, come on, John.
But like Beast those Wars. Designs look fun. Those designs look like characters and creatures. They don't look like a bunch of metal stuff stuck together where I'm trying to figure out where's the voice coming from, So in that sense, I think there is something, it's like embrace the fantasy aspect of these movies a little bit. I think that is there, but love or hate Michael Bay, and I definitely have felt both things. Like the scope and the movement and everything it's like is something he does, and I think these movies are they're the right canvas for that kind of effects and everything, because the characters are literally huge. You know, the characters are like the size of a building, so, or as tall as a building. So I don't know. I think there is something like even if I'm not watching them, I want Transformers movies to be ridiculous and decadent and insane. And I guess quietly this franchise has kept on chugging. This is what, the seventh or eighth, right?
I think was it 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 7th.
Okay. So yeah, I mean it's one of those little.
I feel like it's dwindling a bit. Like, I think like The Last Night, like the Mark Wahlberg one, and like Bumblebee even like underperforming. I think this one is underperforming again.
I'm to understand that Wahlberg plays an inventor in that.
He that's the viral clip. Yeah, he is the inventor. But we forget that like it's like crazy like that the third and fourth movie in the series made over $1 billion each.
That's crazy.
Like Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction made $1.1 billion.
Golly.
And the first two made 700 and 800 million. Like it's a massive property, but it's just like, what is the IP anymore in terms of box office? Like when these movies don't perform like that, like they used to in theaters domestically and especially overseas, because that's where these films made a ton of money. Wasn't like China and Japan, like the overseas market's been they're just not performing anymore. But that said, I don't know how long it'll be in theaters. It's been out for a few weeks now, but I finally got to check it out, and I liked it. I mean, it'll probably be on VOD in a few weeks, but Rise of the Beast was fun for me for sure.
Oh.
That'll be the episode for this one. That'll do it, guys. Movie.com is the website. YouTube.com/Movie Podcast if you want to kind of get that visual going, that video element, get the eyes on the prize, if you know what I'm saying. Next week we'll get back to the required viewing again. John picked The Last Action Hero from 1993, I think. So that'll be really fun. And again, that's on Netflix. Between now and that podcast, you have a chance to watch it on Netflix. After that, it's going to be gone probably July 1. Don't forget. So watch along and check in next week, and we'll get back to some other reviews. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We're going to all see that next week, as long as Ronald does not get another flat tire.
I know.
Yeah. Damn nails, man.
That was the most boring episode of Black Mirror ever. Is you getting a flat tire and being unable to come to a movie screening.
Man. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. And as always, you made our day. Thanks.